Arthur Pennington was 81 years old, and he had been trying to answer the question for 6 seconds when his son struck him. It was not a dramatic blow. Raymond Pennington, 54, who had made $12 million in commercial real estate, and who had been managing his father's public presence for 30 years with the quiet, controlling efficiency of a man who has decided that an elderly parent is a liability to be administered, struck his father's arm with an open hand in the sharp, dismissive gesture of someone who has stopped thinking of the person they are striking as fully present. He said, at the same moment, "Dad, stop. Let me answer." Arthur Pennington, 81 years old, retired schoolteacher, Korean War veteran. A man who had stood in rooms and held his ground through things that Raymond Pennington could not begin to account for, went quiet. He pulled his arm back. He looked at the board. His hands, which had been reaching for the buzzer with the eager precision of a man who still wanted very much to participate in his own life, folded together in front of him. And the look on his face, the specific, practiced, quiet withdrawal of a person who has been told many times, in many ways, to step back, was the look that Steve Harvey saw from 11 feet away, and it was the look that ended the game. Steve Harvey did not pause. He did not calculate. He pointed at Raymond Pennington and said, to the security team at the edge of the stage, "Get him out." And then he walked to Arthur Pennington and said, "Sir, I want you to finish your answer." It was a Tuesday in August, and the taping had been running since 10 in the morning. The Pennington family had come from Dallas. Raymond, his wife Deborah, his brother Gerald, Gerald's wife Pam, and Arthur, who had been brought along in the specific way that certain families bring their elderly relatives to public events. Physically present, emotionally managed, expected to perform warmth, and then recede. Arthur had been vibrant in the green room. He had told 3 jokes, 2 of which had been genuinely funny, and 1 of which had been from the Korean War era and had required some explanation. He had been sharp and present and interested in everything, asking the production staff about the cameras, about how the board worked, about whether Steve Harvey was as funny in person as on television. He was the kind of 81-year-old who made you recalibrate what 81 was supposed to look like. Raymond had been watching his father's engagement in the green room with the expression of a man observing a variable he is not sure he can control. He had redirected Arthur's questions twice, answered on Arthur's behalf once, and placed his hand on Arthur's shoulder 3 times in the way that looks like affection from across the room and functions as something else entirely up close. Arthur Pennington had served in Korea at 20 years old. He had come home and spent 38 years teaching 7th-grade social studies in Dallas, and he had taught it with the specific dedication of a man who understood. From his own experience, that history was not something that happened to other people. He had coached the school's debate team for 22 of those years. He had been named Teacher of the Year 4 times. He had attended every single one of his students' graduations that he knew about, which was most of them, because he sent a postcard to former students every spring asking where their graduation was being held. He had accumulated, in 38 years, the specific kind of quiet wealth that is measured in the people who remember you and what you taught them. Raymond had grown up in that household. He had done well by every external measure. He had also grown up with a man whose greatest attention was given to his students, whose presence in the home was warm but somewhat distributed, and who had aged in the last decade into a person who needed managing, which was a role Raymond had appointed himself to with the efficiency and emotional distance of someone who has confused management with love. Nobody in that studio knew what Arthur had been quietly navigating for the last 4 years. The game had been going well. Arthur had been spectacular, buzzing in with the speed and accuracy of a man whose mind was working at full capacity, landing the second-ranked answer in round 2. Getting a top answer in round 3, with a response that had made the audience laugh, and Steve Harvey visibly delighted. Steve had been spending more time near Arthur's position than the game required, because Arthur was the best thing happening in the studio and everyone knew it. The audience had adopted Arthur completely. He was their person. Between rounds 3 and 4, on a question about things people reach for in an emergency, Arthur had begun buzzing in early and was in the process of organizing his answer. A 6-second process that his 81-year-old mind performed perfectly well, given the fraction of a moment it had been given, when Raymond struck his arm and told him to stop. Steve Harvey had his back to the Pennington podium when it happened. He heard the sound. He turned. He read Arthur's face in the half-second it took for Arthur's hands to fold. He pointed at Raymond. He said, "Get him out." Raymond Pennington said, "Excuse me?" with the specific indignation of a man who has never been ejected from anywhere. The security team was at his position in 5 seconds. He did not go gracefully. He said several things as he was escorted to the production holding area, including 2 references to his attorney. Steve Harvey did not look at him during any of it. He was already walking to Arthur. He stood in front of Arthur Pennington and he said, "Sir, what was your answer?" Arthur looked up. His hands, which had been folded, separated. He sat up slightly. He said, "First aid kit." Steve turned to the board. "Number 3. He turned back to Arthur. He said, "Good answer." Arthur said, "I was going to say it." Steve said, "I know. I could see you were going to say it." He paused. "I want you to know that I saw you. This whole room saw you." Arthur Pennington, 81 years old, Korean War veteran, 38 years of teaching 7th grade social studies, 4 Teacher of the Year awards, postcards every spring to students whose graduations he wanted to attend. He looked at Steve Harvey, and his eyes were very steady, and he said, "I'm still in here. I just need people to stop deciding I'm not." The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey pressed his handkerchief to his face. He stepped back. He turned to the audience and then to the cameras and he said, "I want to talk to everyone watching at home right now. Because what this man just said is the most important thing anyone has said on this stage this season." He looked into the camera. There are people in your life, your parents, your grandparents, people who are getting older, and there is a moment when the people around them start making decisions for them. Small ones first, and then bigger ones. And the person is still there, still in there, still wanting to answer the question, and nobody is letting them. He stopped. Don't do that. Don't be the person who decides someone is finished before they've decided it themselves. He said, "I grew up watching my grandmother be the sharpest person in every room, right up until the end. And I watched people talk around her and past her and about her like she wasn't there. And I thought then that I would never do that to anyone. And I hope I haven't." He looked at Arthur. "You're not done, sir, not by a long shot." Steve Harvey called his Elder Care Foundation contact from the stage floor. He announced a $40,000 contribution to a senior dignity and advocacy program that specifically provided legal and social support to elderly individuals experiencing family-based diminishment or elder financial abuse. He said, "Because Arthur Pennington is not the only person in this country who is still in there and still needs someone to say so." He called Arthur's former school in Dallas. He reached the current principal's office. He told the principal what he was calling about, and the principal said, "Mr. Pennington is a legend here. We have a hallway named after him." Steve said, "Tell him that. Tell him yourself." He handed the phone to Arthur. The principal told Arthur that the hallway still carried his name and that 3 of his former students were now on the faculty. Arthur listened with his eyes closed and his head down. When the call ended, he handed the phone back to Steve and said, "I taught good kids." Steve said, "You made them good." Arthur looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "That's the nicest thing anybody's said to me in 4 years." He announced both families would receive the full prize, the prize being distributed to Gerald, Pam, Deborah, and Arthur, with Raymond's portion redirected at Steve's discretion to the elder care program. The competing family, the Washingtons, from Atlanta, had been standing at their podium in complete stillness since the ejection. Their grandmother, Dorothy, walked across the stage and sat down next to Arthur and said, simply, "My late husband was a teacher. You would have liked each other." Arthur said, "What did he teach?" Dorothy said. Arthur said, "Well, of course I would have." The episode aired 5 weeks later. The clip of Arthur Pennington saying, "I'm still in here. I just need people to stop deciding I'm not," reached 320 million views in 11 days. It became the most shared individual sentence from any game show in the history of American television. The hashtag #ImStillInHere was used in 61 countries and became the rallying phrase for 3 separate elder advocacy campaigns in the following year. Gerald Pennington, Arthur's younger son, who had been standing at the podium and had said nothing during the incident, called Steve Harvey's foundation the day after the episode aired. He said he had been watching Raymond manage their father for 4 years and had not intervened because he did not know how, and because the family dynamics had made it difficult. He said the clip had made it simple. He asked what he could do. Steve's foundation director sent him a list of elder care legal resources. Gerald hired an attorney the following week and initiated an assessment of Arthur's living and care arrangement. 3 months after the taping, Arthur Pennington had moved to a senior living community in Dallas that he had chosen himself, not because he needed full care, but because he had decided he wanted to live somewhere with other people his age and with programming that matched his interests. He had enrolled in the community's debate workshop. He had won the first competitive round by arguing in favor of the historical impact of the Korean War on American foreign policy for the following 2 decades, which the moderator said was the most substantive opening argument the program had ever received. A year after the taping, Raymond Pennington had enrolled in a family therapy program that his wife Deborah had presented as non-negotiable. He was in the middle of it. His therapist, in a session summary that Raymond later shared publicly, described his progress as slow and authentic, which Raymond said was the most honest thing anyone had said about him in a decade. Arthur Pennington sent Steve Harvey a postcard. It was from a trip he had taken with his senior living community to Washington, D.C. in the spring. It showed the Korean War Memorial. On the back, Arthur had written 3 sentences. "I stood in front of this and thought about who I was at 20. Then I thought about who I am at 81. Still the same person. Possibly better." Steve Harvey kept the postcard in his dressing room. He showed it to his producer the morning it arrived. He said, "That's the whole show. Right there. If this story about a man who was still in there, and the moment the room finally stopped deciding otherwise, moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to know that age does not diminish presence, and presence should never be taken from anyone. Have you ever watched someone refuse to be made smaller? Let us know in the comments, and ring that notification bell for more moments that remind us that dignity is not a young person's right. It belongs to everyone, at every age.